Hi folks, so we are going to be working with phrases, and phrases are important for us in our writing because they help us to jazz up our writing. They make it a little more fluffy, a little more pizzazzy, give our writing personality instead of being straight, boring sentences all the time. Um, for what we work on primarily in ninth grade is figuring out what the phrases are. So we do a lot of, identifying and underlining and labeling and that kind of stuff. But the goal is by the end of ninth grade that you can start using these in your own writing so that it's not super boring to read what you write. So you need to know what a phrase is. So here's the official definition. It is a group of words that function as a single part of speech. Whether that be a noun or a pronoun or it might be an adjective or an adverb. It's going to work together all as one. So if you have a subject and a verb in it, it's not a phrase. That's a clause, and that's a whole different ball game, right? So let's move on and start talking about what kinds of phrases there are. All right, so let's tackle the ones that you've gone over 100 times before in all your other English classes. Prepositional phrases. If you're that person who can't find a prepositional phrase, and it's because you don't know your preposition words, there's not a lot I can do for you. You have to learn those preposition words. So look them up online, figure out a way, man, because, you're just going to struggle forever if we can't figure that out. So one trick that I have is that you're going to look for the stuff you could take out of the sentence and throw it away. So sometimes I call these garbage phrases because you can toss them out and you still have a complete sentence left behind. So prepositional phrases consist of a preposition word, those things you have to memorize, and the object of a preposition, which is a noun job. So you're looking for a preposition and a noun. The noun is the end, okay? The one thing that may be new to you is that prepositions work as adjectives or adverbs because they're going to either be describing a thing in the sentence or they're going to be describing what's happening in the sentence. So pause the video, go through here and try to figure out what your prepositional phrases are, and then for added bonus, figure out if they're working as an adjective or an adverb. Okay, so really quickly here, I'm just going to go through and show you what we would do in class if we were working together. So after school, we need to meet at the library. We know after is a prepositional phrase. School is the noun. That's the end of it. The comma tells us so. At is the preposition, and we're going to go all the way to library because that's the noun. Notice the is included because it's describing library. In our second sentence, which of Shakespeare's plays are you studying? Of Shakespeare's plays. Of is our preposition word, plays is the noun. All right, and then the final one I threw in several just to kind of throw you off a little bit. Maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. You have under the table, behind the couch, and in the closet. Oh, sorry, my parentheticals are pretty bad. Anyway, so moving right along, let's see if you figured out what they're talking about, which is a little trickier. So after school is going to tell us when we need to meet. And since it's a when question, this is working as an adverb. At the library is going to tell us where we need to meet. Again, a where question, which is an adverb. Okay. Which of Shakespeare's plays, which is describing, or which is a pronoun. So it's describing a pronoun, which is an adjective. And it's telling us which one, like it's literally right there in the question. And in our bottom sentence, you have under the table, behind the couch, in the closet, which are all where questions. Where did you look? I looked all those places. All right, so these are all adverb ones. So do we have to label all of our prepositional phrases when we write? No. No, we're just doing that here so I can show you how they work in a sentence. Okay, so up first are participles and participial phrases. Participles and some of the other phrases we'll talk about today are a little bit different because they're called verbal phrases, or just if you hear the word verbals, these are things that look like verbs, but act like another part of speech. So in this case, participles are acting as adjectives, right? They are easy to identify because they're going to end in ing or they're going to end in ed, and they're describing something. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can figure out what the participles and participial phrases would be, the things that are being used as descriptions instead of what's happening in the sentence. Okay, so welcome back. Hopefully you've gone through and figured out your participial phrases just fine. But let's go ahead and check our work. Our first sentence here, a girl named May helped her onto the bus. All right, so let's go ahead and first figure out what our verbs are. In this case, our verb is going to be helped because it's what the girl is doing, okay? Let's go ahead and in our second sentence, she wanted to be the team's leading scorer. She did what? She wanted. So that's our verb. And in our last sentence, the teacher judging the contest nodded and gave a relieved sigh. What did the teacher do? The teacher nodded and the teacher gave. So those are our verbs. So those are not going to be our participles or our participial phrases because they're working as actual verbs and not as adjectives. All right, so go back now and look for your ed and ing words. So we have named, we have leading, we have judging, and I threw in a tricky one. We have relieved. Did you get all four? Because I kind of threw you for a loop, I think. Maybe not. All right, so now just to figure out the phrases, you have to look and see what else goes with that word. So in our first sentence, named, what else describes named? Well, she was named May, so this whole thing is going to be our participial phrase. Now, some people ask, why wouldn't it be girl? Okay, that's actually our subject. So that's the noun that this whole thing is describing. So it's not going to be included in our thing. Now, that gets trickier in like the next one because leading is describing scorer, but it also like goes with it. I mean, without those things together, we wouldn't have a participle. So here's the trick. If the word it's describing goes before it, like girl, then you don't include it. If it comes after it, then you do include it. So this is going to be the end of our phrase. So what else is describing leading scorer? Well, the team's leading scorer. Okay? A little tricky just because the descriptor thing is inside of the parentheses, but hopefully you understand that if it comes in front, you skip it. And if it comes within it, you include it. Okay, so let's look at our last one. The teacher judging the contest nodded and gave a relieved sigh. Judging is our participle. What's it describing? It's describing the teacher. So we're not going to include it. This is going to be our first word. Okay. And what is the teacher judging? The teacher's judging the contest. So judging the contest is our whole participial phrase. How about relieved? What's relieved? Well, the sigh is relieved. So that's going to be within our phrase because it comes after. And does anything else describe relieved sigh? Well, this little itty word a goes with a relieved sigh. It's telling us which one. Okay? So a little tricky in terms of what it's describing and how it's included, but otherwise those are our participles and participial phrases. Gerunds are the next kind of verbals. They're ing words that work as nouns, and they perform 5 different jobs. These are your noun jobs that I keep harping on about. So a noun can be a subject in a sentence. It can be a direct object that tells us what, and then it can be an indirect object, that tells us to or for whom. It can be a predicate nominative, which comes after a linking verb and answers a what question. And finally, it can be an object of the preposition. So that has to come after a preposition, okay? So it can be one of those 5 jobs. So pause the video, look for your ing words, and see if you can figure out what job it's performing. All right, so hopefully you were able to find your ing words pretty easily. Our first sentence is going to be walking. Our second sentence is painting. And our third sentence is writing. So now the next trick is to figure out what goes with those things. So is anything describing the walking? Well, she's walking by herself and she's walking after dark. So this whole thing is going to be our gerund phrase. Let's look then at where it is in the sentence. With direct objects and indirect objects, these you need an action verb. So we would look for a verb first. With a predicate nominative, you need a linking verb. All right, so both those things are going to come after verbs, but we're going to have to figure out what kind of verb it is. So just looking at that, we already know that walking by yourself after dark cannot be a direct object, an indirect object, or a predicate nominative because it's at the beginning of the sentence. It's not after a verb. We also know now that it can't be an object of the preposition because there's no preposition word in front of it. Again, it's at the beginning. So this is what our sentence is about. So it is the subject. All right. The next one, I enjoyed painting houses with my grandpa. Right? What's describing painting? Well, I'm painting houses. So houses is going to go with painting. Anything else telling us about painting houses? Well, I do it with my grandpa. So painting houses with my grandpa is going to be my whole gerund phrase. And it's working as a noun. It's not a subject because it's not at the beginning of a sentence. And if I look at the word right in front of it, that's not a preposition. So I know I'm down to one of these last 3 options that work with verbs, right? So let me look at what kind of verb I have. Enjoyed. Can I go home and enjoy something? Yes, I can. So that's going to be an action verb. If you can't go home and do it, like, can you go home and is? No. So that is kind of my trick for figuring out if it's action or linking. Because it's action, I know I'm down to direct or indirect objects. So now I got to know those questions. Direct object tells us what, and indirect objects tells us to whom or for whom. So in this case, it tells what I enjoyed. So this is going to be a direct object. Again, a noun job. All right, last one, writing. What describes writing? Well, his writing's unique and it's his. So his unique writing is going to be our gerund phrase. And it comes at the beginning of the sentence. We already did this with this first one. We know now that this is definitely the subject. So easy peasy lemon squeezy. Okay, so appositives are next. Appositives are not verbals because they don't look like verbs. They're nouns or pronouns. So this one will be a nice little break for you. Basically, you're going to look for a noun or pronoun that's identifying another noun or pronoun in the sentence, and they're placed next to each other. They're not found later in the predicate or something like that. So these are pretty easy to find. Go ahead and pause the video. Look for the noun or pronoun that's giving more information about a noun or pronoun right next to it. All right, so looking at our very first sentence, my friend Christine came to see me march in the band. So if I look, Christine right here is renaming my friend. So there's our positive. There's nothing else here describing Christine. So that's all you have to find in that sentence. In the second one, was that Christine, the mayor's wife? This is really about my best friend who is the mayor's wife. So the mayor's wife here is our positive, and it is renaming Christine. Now our actual positive is the wife, but the mayor is describing more information about the wife. So the phrase I should have said is the mayor's wife, and the appositive is just wife. All right, so then our last one, during film lit, the elective Mrs. Sandberg teaches. We watched Rocky, one of the best sports films ever. So I actually put two appositive phrases in this one to kind of, throw you for a loop. So the first one is elective, because elective is describing film lit. And now we have to figure out what all goes with that. Well, that's pretty easy because we have commas here. So the elective Mrs. Sandberg teaches is our whole appositive phrase because it's describing the elective. Then in our second one, one is our appositive. It's an actual pronoun, all right? So then we look for the stuff going with it. That's easy because we have a comma again. So one of the best sports films ever is our positive phrase, and that's all describing Rocky, which really is one of the best sports films ever. So I think positives are pretty straightforward. If you need more help, just let me know. Okay, on to our next verbal, which is Buzz Lightyear's favorite, and that's your trick to remember what this is. To plus a verb is an infinitive, and it works as a noun or an adjective or an adverb. That's the tricky part, and we'll deal with that again. Like I said, you're not going to have to label these every single time. I just want to teach you how it functions in the sentence. So if you pause the video, look for to plus a verb, and any words you think describe that to plus a verb. Okay, welcome back. Let's look at our first sentence. For some students, it was easy to pick a subject for the project. Hopefully you figured out to pick is your infinitive here. And what's going with to pick? Well, you're picking a subject, so we'll start with the to. We're going to pick a subject. Oh, and what are we picking the subject for? For the project. So all this is going to be your infinitive phrase, right? If you look next, you have to figure out what it's doing in the sentence. Well, is it describing easy? Is it telling how it was easy or why it was easy? No, that doesn't really make sense, okay? It's telling us what was easy. It was easy to pick. So because it answers a what question, this infinitive is a noun, right? I always look at this word right here in front of it and I ask myself those questions for those parts of speech. And if it doesn't make sense when, like, to explain it to somebody else, like I can't say that to pick a subject for the project tells us how it was easy. That doesn't make any sense. Then you start looking at, to see if maybe it's an adjective or a noun instead. That's the only way to get it, and that's why infinitives are probably the hardest of the phrases because you have three different options to figure out what they're doing in the sentence. All right, so then our second sentence, to improve your writing, you have to read more. So to improve and to read. You had two of them in this one. Hopefully you got them both. All right, what's describing to improve? Well, you're improving your writing, so let's put all that all together. And that comma right there is a big hint to us that that's how far that phrase goes. And then what's describing to read? Well, I'm reading more, so all this goes together. Every once in a while, you'll have a little word maybe in front of it, but that's not very common, so don't get really hung up on that kind of stuff. So to improve your writing, you have to read more. Well, why do I have to read more? I have to read more to improve my writing. So it answers a why question. So this one's an adverb. It's telling why I have to. Okay? Now, you have to read more. What do I have to do? I have to read. So since it's answering a what question and have is an action verb, this is working as a noun. And specifically, it's doing the direct object job because it's telling me what I have to do. All right, so again, you won't label these all the time, but it's just nice for me to be able to show you how they work in a sentence. Okay, so let's do a little bit of practice and play What's the Phrase? We have our first one right here. Rachel will never forget shooting the basket at the wrong hoop in 6th grade. True story. Totally got the ball and totally ran to the wrong hoop, and I was so proud to make the basket all by myself on my fast break, only to realize I was by myself because everybody else was confused about why I was shooting there. So that was a side note, just for your own, giggles. All right, so Rachel will never forget shooting the basket at the wrong hoop in the 6th grade. I helped you out a little bit. I already gave you what kind of phrase we're going to be looking at, which is the thing in italics. We have shooting right here. Shooting ends in ing. So that means we've got what options? It's kind of like Dora, where you're supposed to shout things out, okay? We can either be a gerund, or we can be a participle. So now you have to look at what it's doing. Is shooting describing something else, or is shooting answering what is happening? All right. So in this case, shooting is answering what. It's what I'm never going to forget. So this one is a gerund. Okay, so here we have another ing one. So we know automatically we're dealing with a gerund or a participle. So using her logic skills, she was able to finish the puzzle. Let's consider this. So we know gerunds do noun jobs, which means it has to be a subject, a direct or indirect object, a predicate nominative, or an object of a preposition. We know that participles describe things. So hopefully you figured out this whole thing is describing her, she in this case. If not, and you thought it was a noun, let's consider where it is. First of all, it's not the subject of the sentence, so it can't do that job. It doesn't come after a verb, so it can't do our direct or indirect object jobs. It can't do our predicate nominative jobs. That leaves us with the last noun job, which is an object of a preposition. There's no prepositional word in front of it. So in this case, that rules out all 5 noun jobs. So you know it can't be a gerund because it's not performing any of those functions. That leaves us with just a participle. So if you struggled with that one, hopefully that makes a little more sense when you rule out what the jobs of a noun are. Okay, so we're up to the next one. And in this case, we have 2 to start our phrase off. So that leaves us 2 options. If it has a noun after it, it's going to be a preposition. If it has a verb right after it, it's going to be an infinitive. So we have to look at this word here and see what's up. Okay, prop is a verb. So we're dealing with an infinitive phrase, Buzz Lightyear's favorite. So now what you want to do with this infinitive phrase is look at the words in front of it and figure out if it's a noun, an adjective, or an adverb. All right, so DK says were used, uses the verb, what describes a verb, an adverb. You want to double check that and make sure it's right. It's describing how they were used or why they were used, and both of those questions are adverb questions. So again, just look for that too and figure out if it's a noun or a verb after it to figure out what phrase it's going to be. All right, and here's our last example for at least this video, and then we'll work with them more in class. But receiving his orders, he packed for his deployment. ING, I should have made a different kind. I don't know why I did all ING words, but whatever, it's done. So receiving means it's going to be either a gerund or a participle. It's at the beginning of the sentence, but there's a comma after it. So you know it's describing something. Receiving his orders, that's describing him. He received the orders. All right, so this is going to be a participial phrase and serve as an adjective. Hopefully you understand that from the other ones I did. And now you're ready to move on to some more practice and a little bit of struggling more on your own. If you ever need more help, refer back to this video.